The night was unusually silent as Raja walked home under the pale glow of the moon. The distant howls of stray dogs and the rustling of leaves were the only sounds accompanying him. His work in the city had kept him away from his village for months, but tonight he was relieved to finally return home. The narrow dirt path near the village river stretched before him, and as he approached the old wooden bridge, he noticed a figure dressed in a bridal outfit standing at the edge, poised to jump into the swirling waters below. Startled, Raja called out, "Wait! Don't do it!" The figure turned to reveal a tear-streaked face beneath the heavy bridal veil. "Who are you? Why are you ending your life?" he asked, his voice trembling with concern. The bride's sobs echoed through the still night. "I have no one left in this world," she whispered. "Leave me alone." Raja, undeterred, stepped closer. "Look, I can't leave you like this. If you have nowhere to go, come with me. I have a home in the village. You can stay until you figure things out." The bride hesitated but finally nodded. As they walked back together, the silence was punctuated by the distant hum of crickets and the occasional murmur of the river. Raja reassured her, "You'll be safe. Promise." Raja's house stood at the edge of the village, shrouded in dust and cobwebs from months of neglect. He unlocked the creaking door, ushering the bride inside. "It's not much, but it's home," he said apologetically. The bride nodded, her veil still covering her face. "What's your name?" Raja asked, trying to make conversation. "Call me whatever you like," she replied softly. "All right, Rani. That suits you," he said with a faint smile. "I'm Raja. Looks like we're a perfect match." Rani retired to a room while Raja began cleaning the house. As he worked, strange noises filled the night. Dogs howled incessantly outside, and shadows seemed to flicker in the corners of his vision. Shrugging it off as fatigue, he went to bed, but his sleep was restless, filled with unsettling dreams. The next morning, a milkman passing by noticed movement in the supposedly abandoned house. Curious, he knocked on the door, only to have it opened by Rani, her face hidden by the bridal veil. The milkman's scream echoed as he fled back to the village, claiming he had seen a ghost. Word spread quickly. Villagers gathered to discuss the possessed house and the mysterious bride. The village head, Sarpanch, decided to investigate the next day. Meanwhile, Raja returned home late that evening. He found Rani sitting silently, her hands folded in her lap. "Rani, you've been quiet. Are you all right?" he asked. "Why did you help me?" she asked suddenly, her voice low and cold. "Because no one deserves to be alone," he replied. "But you haven't told me your story yet. How did you end up on that bridge?" After a pause, Rani revealed, "I was abandoned on my wedding night by a man who promised me a new life. With no family and nowhere to go, I wandered until despair brought me to that river." Raja's heart ached for her. "Stay here as long as you need," he offered. "But if you wish to truly move on, you'll need to confront your past." As they spoke, the sound of footsteps echoed outside. When Raja looked out the window, he saw nothing but a pack of stray dogs staring intently at the house. The next morning, Sarpanch arrived with a group of villagers to investigate. To their surprise, they found the house locked and covered in dust, as though untouched for years. Confused, they left, dismissing the milkman's claims as mere imagination. Later that day, a headless body was discovered in the forest. It was identified as the milkman who had fled the house earlier. Panic spread through the village, and whispers of the haunted house resurfaced. Sarpanch decided it was time to burn the house down to rid the village of the curse. That night, Raja returned home to find Rani standing by the window, her veil still in place. "Rani, it's time you showed me your face," he said firmly. She turned slowly. "Are you sure?" "Yes. I've wanted to help you since the day we met, but I need to know who you truly are." Ronnie lifted her veil, revealing a grotesque, scarred visage. Raja staggered back, but she continued, "You want the truth? I'm no bride. I'm a thief who disguises herself to trap unsuspecting men. But you're not what you seem either, are you?" Raja smiled eerily. "You're right. I've known all along that you weren't a bride. Do you know why? Because the real bride of this house is me." Ronnie's eyes widened as Raja's form shimmered. His voice deepened as he recounted his story. Years ago, he had been betrayed and murdered in this very house. His parents' greed had driven them to kill him and his wife, Ronnie. But their souls had never found peace. "I've been waiting for someone like you," Raja said. "You've brought life back to this house, and now you'll pay the price." As the villagers approached with torches, the house erupted in screams and laughter. The flames consumed the structure, and with it, the restless spirits of Raja and Ronnie. The villagers watched in horror as the house burned to ashes, believing they had finally rid themselves of the curse. The next morning, the villagers stood by the smoldering remains of the house, relieved yet shaken. "The haunted bride is gone," Sarpanch declared. "Our village is safe again." But as they dispersed, a lone figure in a bridal outfit was seen standing by the river, her veil blowing in the wind. The villagers never spoke of the house again, but they avoided the river after dark, haunted by the ghostly bride who still lingered, waiting for her next visitor. Story 2. It was a late, silent night as Raja walked back home after a long day at work. The village road was eerily quiet, with only the faint chirping of crickets accompanying his footsteps. As he approached the bridge by the river, he noticed a woman dressed in a bridal outfit standing at the edge, ready to jump into the water. Startled, Raja shouted, "Wait, don't do this. Who are you, and why are you doing this?" The bride turned to him, her face hidden behind a veil, and sobbed, "I have no one left in this world. Please leave me alone." Concerned, Raja replied, "It's not safe for you to be here alone at this hour. Let me help you. You can stay at my place for tonight and figure things out tomorrow." After some hesitation, the bride nodded and followed Raja to his home. When they reached Raja's house, it was evident that the place had been abandoned for months. Dust and cobwebs covered the furniture. Raja apologized. "I've been away in the city for work. Don't worry. I'll clean up and make it comfortable for you." The bride remained quiet, her face still hidden under the veil. Raja asked her name, and she replied, "Call me whatever you like." "All right," Raja said with a smile, "I'll call you Ronnie." That night, strange things began happening. Outside Raja's window, a pack of dogs gathered, growling and barking furiously. The milkman who passed by the house the next morning claimed to have seen a ghostly figure in a bridal outfit. Terrified, he ran back to the village, spreading rumors about the haunted house. Meanwhile, Ronnie avoided lifting her veil, even inside the house. When Raja asked her about her past, she revealed a tragic story. "I was abandoned on my wedding night by a man who never loved me. Left alone in the world, I had no choice but to wander. When I saw the river, I thought death would be better than this life." Moved by her story, Raja offered her a place to stay permanently. But, he added, "We must marry. In this village, people talk if a man and woman live together without being married." Ronnie asked for time to think about it. As the days passed, the villagers became increasingly suspicious of Raja's house. The village head, along with some men, decided to investigate. When they reached Raja's house, they found the door locked and covered in dust, as if it had not been opened for years. Confused, they left, dismissing the milkman's claims as hallucinations. That night, the village inspector, Ajay, decided to visit the house. As he entered, he saw Rani sitting under a tree, crying. He approached her cautiously and demanded, "Who are you? Show me your face." Rani slowly lifted her veil, revealing hollow, glowing eyes. Her voice turned cold. "Do you really want to see what's beneath this veil?" AJ's scream echoed through the night. The next morning, his headless body was found in the forest. Terrified by the events, the villagers gathered with torches, determined to burn the haunted house and end the curse. They surrounded the house and set it ablaze. Inside, Rani's ghost appeared before Raja, her voice echoing with rage. "Do you think you can escape me? I know your secret, Raja. You killed me years ago and buried my headless body in this house." Raja smirked, his own form shifting into a ghostly figure. "And you think you're the only one haunting this place? I've been here all along, waiting for someone foolish enough to step into my trap." As the house burned, the two ghosts vanished into the flames, their tortured souls finally finding release. The villagers watched in silence as the fire consumed the house, vowing never to speak of the haunted bride and the ghostly Raja again. The village returned to its quiet life, but whispers of the cursed house lingered in the air, warning others to stay away from its ashes. Story 3. On a desolate, moonless night, Ravi trudged along the dusty road leading to his village. The silence was overwhelming, broken only by the faint rustle of leaves. As he approached the rickety bridge by the river, a figure caught his eye. A woman in a bridal gown, poised at the edge, ready to leap into the dark waters below. Alarmed, Ravi called out, "Wait! Don't do it! Please, tell me what's wrong." The woman turned slightly, her face hidden behind a heavy veil, and whispered, "Leave me. There's nothing left for me in this world." "You're not alone," Ravi replied gently. "Let me help you. You can't stay here like this. Come with me. I have a place where you can rest." Hesitant but defeated, she nodded, and Ravi led her to his modest home on the outskirts of the village. Ravi's house was small and neglected, with cobwebs hanging in corners and a thick layer of dust coating the furniture. "I've been away for months," Ravi explained apologetically. "But don't worry, I'll clean it up for you." The woman remained silent, her veil never lifting. "What's your name?" Ravi asked. "Call me whatever you wish," she replied softly. "All right," he said with a smile. "I'll call you Mira." That night, peculiar events unfolded. Dogs howled incessantly outside, their cries piercing the stillness. The milkman, passing by early the next morning, claimed to have seen a ghostly figure through the window. Panic spread through the village as rumors of Ravi's haunted house took hold. Meanwhile, Mira revealed fragments of her tragic past. "I was abandoned on my wedding night," she said, "left to fend for myself. I wandered until despair led me to that bridge." Ravi, moved by her sorrow, offered her a place in his life. "Stay with me," he said, "but this village is full of gossip. We'll need to marry to avoid suspicion." Mira lowered her head. "I need time to think," she whispered. The village headman, along with a group of men, decided to investigate Ravi's house. When they arrived, they found the door locked and covered in dust, as though it hadn't been opened in years. Perplexed, they left, dismissing the rumors as baseless. That night, Inspector Arjun visited the house. He spotted Mira under a tree, her sobs echoing in the darkness. Approaching cautiously, he demanded, "Who are you? Show me your face." Mira slowly lifted her veil, revealing hollow eyes and a skeletal grin. "You wish to see me? Then look closely," she hissed. Arjun's scream shattered the night, and by dawn, his headless body was discovered near the river. Fear gripped the village as the headman rallied the villagers. "We must destroy that house and end this curse," he declared. Torches in hand, they marched to Ravi's home and set it ablaze. Inside, Ravi confronted Mira. "It's over," he said. "You can't escape." Mira's voice turned icy. "Do you think you're innocent? I know your secret, Ravi. You killed your bride on your wedding night. You buried her body but left her spirit restless." Ravi's face twisted into a cruel smile. "And you think you're the only one seeking revenge? I've been waiting for someone like you to take the blame." As the flames consumed the house, both Ravi and Mira's ghostly forms intertwined, their curses binding them forever. The villagers watched in silence, believing they had vanquished the evil. But the whispers of the cursed house lingered, a chilling reminder of the shadows that once haunted their lives. Story 4. It was a moonless night, the kind where the darkness seemed to stretch endlessly, swallowing the world whole. Ravi trudged along the deserted road leading to his village. His lantern cast flickering shadows that danced across the dusty path. As he neared the rickety bridge over the river, his footsteps faltered. In the dim light, he saw a figure draped in white, a woman in bridal attire, standing at the edge of the bridge. Ravi's heart raced. He called out, "Hey, stop! What are you doing?" The woman turned her head slightly, but her face remained obscured by a heavy veil. "Leave me alone," she said, her voice barely audible over the murmuring water below. "There's nothing left for me in this world. Please, don't do this," Ravi pleaded, stepping closer. "Whatever it is, we can fix it. You don't have to be alone. Come with me. I'll help you." For a moment, she stood still, her shoulders shaking as though she were silently crying. Then, hesitantly, she nodded and stepped away from the edge. Ravi extended his hand, and she took it without a word. Together, they made their way to his modest home on the outskirts of the village. Ravi's house was a small, neglected structure. Cobwebs hung in the corners, and a thick layer of dust coated the furniture. "I've been away for months," Ravi explained apologetically, lighting a lantern. "Don't worry, I'll clean it up tomorrow. You can rest here tonight." The woman remained silent, her veil still concealing her face. "What's your name?" Ravi asked, hoping to ease her discomfort. "Call me whatever you wish," she replied softly. "All right," he said after a pause. "I'll call you Mira." That night, Ravi struggled to sleep. The silence outside was punctuated by the distant howling of dogs. In the early hours of the morning, the milkman passing by claimed to have seen a ghostly figure peering through Ravi's window. By the time the villagers gathered, the figure had vanished, leaving only whispers of unease. Inside, Mira shared fragments of her sorrowful tale. "I was abandoned on my wedding night," she said, her voice trembling. "Left alone in the wilderness. I wandered until despair brought me to that bridge." Ravi listened intently, his heart heavy with compassion. "You don't have to face this alone anymore," he said. "Stay here as long as you need. But this village is full of gossip. If you're going to stay, we'll need to marry." Mira lowered her head. "I need time to think," she whispered. Meanwhile, the rumors about Ravi's haunted house grew. The village headman and a group of men decided to investigate. When they reached Ravi's house, they found the door locked and covered in dust, as though it hadn't been opened in years. Confused and uneasy, they left, dismissing the tales as mere hysteria. That night, Inspector Arjun arrived to investigate the growing unease in the village. As he neared Ravi's house, he spotted Mira under a tree, her sobs echoing through the still night. "Who are you?" he demanded, approaching cautiously. "Show me your face." Mira slowly rose, her movements deliberate and eerie. She lifted her veil, revealing hollow eyes and a skeletal grin. "You wanted to see me? Then look closely," she hissed. Arjun's scream pierced the darkness. By dawn, His headless body was found near the river, sending shockwaves through the village. The villagers, now gripped by terror, turned to the headman. "We must destroy that house," he declared. "It's the only way to rid ourselves of this curse." Armed with torches, they marched to Ravi's home. The flickering flames illuminated their determined faces as they surrounded the house. Inside, Ravi confronted Mira. "It's over," he said, his voice steady. "You can't escape now." Mira's demeanor changed. Her voice grew icy and venomous. "Do you think you're innocent?" she asked. "I know your secret, Ravi. You killed your bride on your wedding night. You buried her body but left her spirit restless." Ravi's lips twisted into a cruel smile. "And you think you're the only one seeking revenge? I've been waiting for someone like you to take the blame." As the villagers set the house ablaze, the flames roared to life, consuming everything in their path. Inside, Ravi and Mira's ghostly forms intertwined, their curses binding them together for eternity. The villagers watched as the house collapsed into ashes, believing they had vanquished the evil. The headman declared, "The curse is lifted. Our village is safe once more." But as they turned to leave, a chilling wind swept through the ruins. From the smoldering ashes, faint whispers rose, a reminder that some shadows never truly fade. Story 5. The village of Sahilpur was nestled between a dense forest and a wide, flowing river. It was a quiet place, where traditions ran deep and stories of spirits and curses were whispered around evening fires. One such story was of the bridal ghost, a young woman abandoned at the altar decades ago, who was said to haunt the forest in her wedding attire, seeking the justice she never received. One evening, Ariv, a skeptical and curious traveler, found himself passing through the village. As night fell, the villagers urged him to stay indoors. "Do not cross the forest after dark," they warned. But Ariv, intrigued by their fear, dismissed their advice. Lantern in hand, he ventured into the woods. The air was heavy with silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. As he reached the heart of the forest, a figure emerged, a bride draped in a crimson sari, her veil covering her face. Ariv stopped in his tracks. "Who's there?" he called out. The bride stood still, her head tilted slightly. "Why are you here?" she asked, her voice soft yet chilling. "I could ask you the same," Ariv replied. "Are you lost?" The bride didn't answer. Instead, she turned and began walking deeper into the forest. Against his better judgment, Ariv followed. The bride led Ariv to an ancient, crumbling mansion hidden beneath the forest canopy. The house, though decayed, still bore traces of its former grandeur. Massive doors, intricate carvings, and broken chandeliers that sparkled in the moonlight. "Whose house is this?" Ariv asked. "It was mine," she replied, her voice tinged with sorrow. "Before they took everything from me." As they entered, the air grew colder. Ariv noticed portraits on the walls, each depicting the same young woman in bridal attire. "This is you," he said, pointing to the paintings. The bride nodded. "I was to be married here," she began, "to a man who swore to love me forever. But on our wedding night, he revealed his true intentions. He wanted my family's wealth, not my love. When I refused to sign over everything, he—" Her voice broke, and she clutched her veil tighter. "What happened?" Ariv pressed gently. "He killed me," she whispered, "strangled me with my own veil and left my body beneath the river bridge. They never found me, and he lived a full life, free of guilt." The walls seemed to close in around Ariv as her story unfolded. He felt a pang of anger at the injustice but also a creeping fear. "Why are you here, then?" he asked. "To finish what was left undone," she said, her tone shifting. "And perhaps to find peace." The bride's presence grew more intense as the night deepened. Candles around the mansion flickered to life, and shadows danced on the walls. Arav realized he wasn't alone in the house. Other figures, pale and silent, began appearing in the corners of the room. "Who are they?" he asked, his voice trembling. "They are those who've wronged me," she replied, "and those who've come too close to my truth." Arav took a step back, realizing the danger he was in. "I haven't wronged you," he said. "Perhaps not," she said, turning toward him. "But you followed me willingly, and now you know too much." The door slammed shut behind him. Arav's heart raced as the shadows closed in. "Wait," he shouted. "I can help you. Tell me the name of the man who did this to you." The bride paused. "Rajan. He still lives in this village, claiming to be a pious elder. He walks free while I remain trapped." Arav seized the opportunity. "Let me confront him. If you take your revenge on the wrong person, you'll never find peace." She considered his words, her veil fluttering as though moved by an unseen wind. "You have until dawn," she said. "If you fail, your fate will be sealed here." Arav raced back to the village, reaching the elder Rajan's house. He banged on the door until the old man answered, his face etched with irritation. "What is the meaning of this?" Rajan barked. "You know why I'm here," Arav said, stepping inside. "It's about the bride." At the mention of her, Rajan's face turned pale. "What nonsense are you spouting?" "She told me everything," Arav pressed. "How you killed her for greed and left her body to rot. Admit it." Rajan's hands trembled, but he remained silent. Arav pulled him toward the forest. "If you won't confess to me, confess to her." As they reached the mansion, the bride stood waiting, her veil shimmering in the pale moonlight. Rajan collapsed to his knees. I didn't mean to," he stammered. "I was desperate. Please, forgive me." The bride removed her veil, revealing her hollow, sunken face. "Forgiveness is not mine to give," she said. Her voice echoed as the shadows surged forward, enveloping Rajan in darkness. His screams echoed briefly, then silence fell. The bride turned to Arav. "Thank you," she said. "You've done what no one else dared to." Before his eyes, her form began to dissolve, the sorrow and vengeance lifting from her spirit. As the first rays of dawn broke through the forest canopy, the mansion crumbled into dust, leaving no trace of its existence. Arav returned to the village, forever changed by the encounter. Though the villagers celebrated the end of the curse, Arav knew he would always carry the memory of the bride beneath the veil. Story 6. The small village of Kali Gadi was infamous for its haunted ruins, a crumbling temple atop a hill, veiled in mist and mystery. No one dared to approach it after sunset, for it was said to be cursed by the spirit of a bride who had been betrayed on her wedding day. Aditi, a young historian, arrived in Kali Gadi with a mission. She had spent years researching folktales and legends, and the story of the eternal bride intrigued her. The villagers, however, were less welcoming of her curiosity. "She is not just a story," warned the village elder, Shivram. "The bride seeks revenge, and her wrath spares no one." Aditi, undeterred, set her sights on uncovering the truth. Armed with a flashlight, a camera, and her journal, she began her trek up the hill one cloudy evening. The climb was steep, and the forest around her grew darker as the sun dipped below the horizon. Finally, she reached the ruins. The temple, though decayed, was still imposing, its carvings of gods and goddesses weathered by time. At its center stood a stone altar draped with an old, tattered bridal veil. Aditi knelt by the altar, running her fingers over the intricate embroidery. "This must be hers," she whispered, pulling out her journal to take notes. As she scribbled, a faint melody reached her ears, the sound of anklets jingling, accompanied by a soft, mournful hum. She froze. "Who's there?" she called, her voice wavering. From the shadows a figure emerged, a bride, dressed in a vibrant red lehenga, her face hidden behind a shimmering veil. Aditi's pulse quickened, but she stood her ground. "Are you the bride?" she asked, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. The figure nodded slowly. "Why have you come here?" The bride's voice was soft yet cold, each word laced with sorrow. "I want to know your story," Aditi said. "Why you haunt this place. Maybe I can help." The bride tilted her head as though considering the offer. "No one can help me," she said. "But if you truly wish to know, listen closely." The air grew colder as the bride began her tale. "My name was Anjali. I was to be married here, in this very temple, to a man I loved deeply. But on the night of the ceremony, I discovered his betrayal. He was in love with another, and my marriage was nothing more than a ruse to secure my family's wealth." Aditi's heart sank as Anjali continued. "When I confronted him, he laughed. 'What can you do?' he said. 'Your fate is sealed.' In my anger and despair, I fled to the edge of the cliff behind this temple and jumped, cursing him with my final breath. But my spirit remains bound here, unable to find peace." Aditi looked at the bride, her voice trembling. "What happened to him? Did he face any consequences?" Anjali's veil fluttered as though moved by an unseen wind. "He married the woman he loved and lived a life of comfort. While I lingered in the shadows, her voice turned sharper. But he is gone now, and my vengeance is unfulfilled." Aditi's curiosity turned to determination. "There has to be a way to free you," she said. "Tell me what you need." Anjali's form flickered, her voice echoing. "Bring me the truth. My betrayal must be known. Only then can I leave this place." Aditi nodded, her resolve firm. Over the next few days, she delved into the village's archives and questioned its elders. Slowly, the pieces of the story fell into place. She discovered records of Anjali's arranged marriage and accounts of the groom's illicit affair. The final piece was a faded photograph of Anjali, her radiant smile a stark contrast to the sorrowful specter Aditi had met. Armed with the truth, Aditi returned to the temple under the full moon. Anjali awaited her at the altar, her veil shimmering in the moonlight. "I found what you asked for," Aditi said, holding up the photograph and the journal filled with evidence. "Your story will not be forgotten." Anjali reached out, her translucent fingers brushing against the photograph. "Thank you," she said, her voice softer now. "But there is one last thing." Before Aditi could respond, the bride's veil lifted, revealing a face both beautiful and haunting. Her eyes burned with a fiery determination. "You must avenge me," she whispered. The ground trembled as Anjali's spirit surged forward, her energy merging with Aditi. Visions of betrayal, heartbreak, and vengeance flooded Aditi's mind. When she opened her eyes, she was no longer herself but a vessel for Anjali's wrath. The village of Kaligati awoke to a storm unlike any they had seen before. Thunder roared, and lightning illuminated the temple ruins. In the heart of the storm stood Aditi, her body glowing with an otherworldly light. She walked through the village, confronting the descendants of those who had wronged Anjali. Their secrets spilled forth, each revelation tearing apart the lies that had buried Anjali's story for decades. By dawn, the storm had passed, and the village was left shaken. At the temple, Aditi stood alone, her eyes heavy with exhaustion. Anjali's veil lay at her feet, its threads unraveling into the wind. "Is it over?" Aditi whispered. From the mist, Anjali's spirit appeared one last time. She smiled, her face no longer burdened by sorrow. "It is," she said. Because of you, I am free. As the first rays of sunlight bathed the temple, Anjali's form dissolved into the light, leaving Aditi with a sense of peace she had never known. Aditi returned to her world, forever changed by the encounter. She published Anjali's story, ensuring her legacy lived on. The ruins of Kali Gadi became a place of reverence rather than fear, a reminder of a bride's resilience and the power of truth. Story 7. The village of Surjapur nestled quietly between lush green hills and a river that sparkled under the sunlight. But as beautiful as the village was, it carried a shadow, an age-old tale of a cursed bride, Shweta, whose spirit was said to haunt the abandoned mansion at the edge of the forest. Karan, an ambitious filmmaker, arrived in Surjapur with his crew, eager to shoot a documentary about the legend of the cursed bride. He had heard whispers of the bride's tragic story and believed it would make for a captivating narrative. As Karan interviewed the villagers, the elder, Devi Prasad, warned him sternly, "Leave this tale untouched. Shweta's spirit does not take kindly to those who disturb her rest." But Karan, skeptical of ghost stories, dismissed the warning. That evening, armed with cameras, he and his crew set out for the mansion. The mansion stood in eerie silence, its once grand facade now covered in vines and decay. As they entered, the air turned cold, and a faint scent of roses filled the air. In the main hall, they found an old wedding photograph hanging crookedly on the wall. The bride in the picture, Shweta, was stunning, her eyes gleaming with hope and love. "She doesn't look cursed," Karan remarked with a nervous laugh. But as the night deepened, the crew began hearing whispers, soft, sorrowful, and growing louder with each passing moment. Determined to uncover the truth, Karan and his crew ventured deeper into the mansion. They found a dusty diary in a locked chest, its pages filled with Shweta's handwriting. The diary revealed her story. Shweta had been married to Rajan, a wealthy and powerful man. But on the night of their wedding, Rajan revealed his true nature. He was cruel and manipulative, treating Shweta as a trophy rather than a partner. When Shweta protested, he accused her of dishonoring his name. Her life became a series of humiliations until one fateful night when Rajan, in a fit of rage, pushed her down the mansion's grand staircase. Shweta died instantly, her bridal jewelry scattered like broken promises. But before she took her final breath, she vowed vengeance. As Karan read the diary aloud, a chilling wind swept through the mansion. The whispers grew louder, now accompanied by the faint sound of anklets and the rustle of fabric. Suddenly, the door slammed shut, and the lights they had set up flickered violently. A figure emerged from the shadows, a bride draped in a red sari, her veil hiding her face. "Why have you come here?" Shweta's voice echoed, filled with sorrow and anger. "We mean no harm," Karan stammered. "We want to tell your story, to let the world know the truth." Shweta's veil shifted slightly, revealing bloodshot eyes that bore into Karan's soul. "My story has been told many times, but no one seeks justice. They come for entertainment, for thrills. Are you any different?" Karan, shaken, promised, "I will do whatever it takes to bring you peace." Shweta stared at him for a long moment before nodding. "Then you must right the wrongs. Rajan's family still thrives, untainted by their sins. They must pay for what they did to me." Karan and his crew returned to the village, determined to uncover the truth about Rajan's descendants. They learned that Rajan's great-grandson, Vikram, lived in a luxurious estate nearby, his wealth built on the foundation of his ancestors' crimes. Karan approached Vikram, seeking answers. Vikram laughed off the allegations, dismissing Shweta's story as a village myth. But when Karan mentioned the mansion and the diary, Vikram's expression darkened. "That house should have been burned down long ago," Vikram muttered. The curse has brought nothing but trouble to my family. Karen realized that Vikram feared the curse but had done nothing to atone for it. Determined to fulfill his promise to Shweta, Karen gathered the villagers and revealed the truth about Rajan's cruelty and Shweta's tragic fate. The villagers, outraged, demanded justice. As the villagers marched to Vikram's estate, the air grew heavy, and the sky darkened unnaturally. Shweta's spirit appeared before them, her veil lifted to reveal a face both beautiful and horrifying. Her skin pale as moonlight, her eyes glowing with vengeance. "You have taken my life," she said, her voice resonating through the crowd. "Now I will take what is owed to me." The ground beneath Vikram's estate cracked, and the once grand mansion crumbled into dust. Vikram, paralyzed by fear, fell to his knees, begging for mercy. Shweta's spirit loomed over him. "Your family's sins have cursed this land for generations. You will live, but you will carry the weight of their guilt." With that, she disappeared, her spirit finally freed from the chains of vengeance. The mansion on the hill, once a symbol of betrayal and despair, collapsed entirely, leaving only a scarred patch of earth. Karen kept his promise. His documentary, titled The Bride's Curse, became a sensation, not for its horror but for its poignant retelling of Shweta's story and the fight for justice. The villagers of Surjapur honored Shweta's memory, turning the mansion's ruins into a shrine for those seeking solace and redemption. As for Karen, he left Surjapur changed, carrying with him not just the tale of the cursed bride, but also a deep respect for the power of truth and justice. Story 8. The village of Chandipur had a peculiar custom. Every year, on the eve of the harvest festival, villagers left offerings at the old banyan tree near the abandoned temple. The offerings were for Shalini, the eternal bride, whose restless spirit was said to haunt the temple grounds. Legend had it that Shalini was a beautiful bride who died on her wedding day. The groom, Madhav, had vanished mysteriously, leaving her waiting at the altar. Heartbroken and humiliated, Shalini wandered the temple grounds in her bridal attire until she succumbed to despair. Her spirit, they said, lingered, waiting for her groom to return and complete their wedding vows. Ravi, a young outsider skeptical of ghost stories, moved to Chandipur to document its culture and folklore. He was particularly intrigued by the tale of the eternal bride. "A ghost waiting for her groom? It's just a story to scare children," he scoffed, dismissing the villagers' warnings. Despite their protests, Ravi decided to visit the temple on the harvest festival's eve, armed with his camera. The temple stood in ruins, its walls cracked and overgrown with ivy. The banyan tree cast long shadows in the moonlight, its gnarled roots resembling skeletal fingers clutching the earth. As Ravi approached, he noticed the offerings, flowers, sweets, and an ornate bridal veil, placed carefully at the tree's base. A strange chill enveloped him, but he pushed it aside, stepping into the temple. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of incense and decay. Ravi's flashlight illuminated faded murals of gods and goddesses on the walls. At the center of the hall stood a broken idol of Lord Vishnu, draped in cobwebs. As he began filming, a faint sound caught his attention, the delicate tinkle of anklets. Ravi turned, his heart racing. Standing in the doorway was a woman in a red bridal sari, her face obscured by a shimmering veil. "Who are you?" Ravi demanded, his voice trembling. The woman did not answer. Instead, she moved gracefully toward him, her anklets ringing softly with every step. Ravi froze as a wave of cold air swept past him. "You've disturbed my vigil," she said, her voice ethereal and filled with sorrow. "Why have you come here?" I wanted to know your story," Ravi stammered. "The truth about the eternal bride." Shalini lowered her veil slightly, revealing eyes that shimmered with tears and an otherworldly glow. You wish to know the truth? Then you must witness it. Before Ravi could react, the world around him dissolved into shadows. Ravi found himself in a grand, illuminated temple, filled with the sounds of celebration. Guests in festive attire moved about, their laughter and chatter echoing through the hall. At the center of the scene stood Shalini, radiant in her bridal attire, but her expression was one of growing unease. Madhav, the groom, was nowhere to be seen. The joyful atmosphere quickly turned tense as whispers spread among the guests. Hours passed, and Shalini's father pleaded with the crowd to wait. But as the night wore on, the truth became clear. Madhav had abandoned her. Suddenly, a shadowy figure emerged from the temple entrance. It was not Madhav, but a man with a sinister aura. Shalini, he called, his voice cold and mocking. Your groom is gone, but I will take his place. The guests recoiled in fear, recognizing the man as Raghav, a notorious dacoit who had terrorized the region. He approached Shalini, his intent clear. No! Shalini screamed, stepping back. I will wait for Madhav. He promised he would come for me. Raghav laughed cruelly. He has abandoned you, and now you are mine. Desperate to escape, Shalini ran into the forest, her anklets ringing like a mournful melody. Raghav followed, but as he closed in, a thunderstorm erupted, lightning illuminating the terrified bride as she tripped and fell near the temple's banyan tree. I will never belong to you, Shalini cried, clutching a dagger from the temple altar. With one swift motion, she plunged it into her chest, choosing death over dishonor. Her dying breath carried a curse. Until Madhav fulfills his vows, my spirit shall remain bound to this place. As Ravi watched, the vision faded, leaving him back in the desolate temple. Shalini's spirit stood before him, her form flickering like a flame in the wind. Now you know my story, she said softly. I was betrayed, but my hope remains. Will you help me find peace? Ravi, moved by her tale, nodded. Tell me how. You must find Madhav's lineage, Shalini whispered. Only his blood can complete the vow he broke. Determined, Ravi returned to the village and delved into its history. After weeks of research, he discovered that Madhav's descendants lived in a neighboring town. He persuaded one of them, a kind-hearted man named Aryan, to visit the temple and offer prayers on behalf of his ancestor. On the next harvest festival's eve, Aryan stood before the banyan tree, holding a garland. As he placed it on the altar, the air grew warm, and the faint sound of wedding bells filled the night. Shalini's spirit appeared, her face serene for the first time. Thank you, she said, her voice like a sigh of relief. The vows are complete. With a final, radiant smile, she dissolved into the moonlight, leaving behind the faint scent of roses. Ravi documented the entire event, but he chose not to release it to the public. Some stories, he realized, are meant to remain sacred. The temple and the banyan tree became a place of solace for those seeking closure and redemption. And though the eternal bride was gone, her tale of love, betrayal, and hope lingered in the hearts of the villagers, a reminder of the power of faith and forgiveness. Story 9. The village of Rajpur was surrounded by a dense forest, known for its eerie stillness and strange occurrences. Deep within the forest stood an ancient, crumbling mansion, whispered to be cursed. The villagers avoided it, warning travelers of the legend of Devika, the forgotten bride. Devika's tale was one of sorrow and betrayal. Decades ago, she was promised to a nobleman, Rajan. On her wedding day, adorned in the finest red silk and gold jewelry, Devika waited for her groom. But Rajan never arrived. Instead, he eloped with another woman, leaving Devika humiliated and broken. Heartache consumed her, and she was never seen again. Ajay, an adventurous journalist, arrived in Rajpur eager to uncover the truth. He was drawn to the tale of the forgotten bride and decided to explore the abandoned mansion, despite the villagers' pleas. "Ghost stories are just exaggerated folklore," he said dismissively. Under a full moon, Ajay ventured into the forest, a flashlight and notebook in hand. The mansion loomed large, its decaying walls entwined with vines. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and a faint, floral fragrance. As Ajay stepped inside, the wooden floor creaked ominously beneath him. The main hall was vast, its grandeur faded with time. A large, broken chandelier hung precariously from the ceiling, and portraits of unfamiliar faces lined the walls, their eyes seeming to follow him. Ajay's flashlight illuminated a grand staircase leading to the upper floors. Just as he was about to ascend, he heard a soft, melodic hum. It was faint but unmistakable, the sound of a woman singing. "Hello? Is someone there?" Ajay called out, his voice echoing. The humming stopped. A chilling silence followed, broken only by the rustling of leaves outside. Gathering his courage, Ajay climbed the stairs, following the sound to a dimly lit room at the end of the corridor. Inside, he found a dusty vanity table with a cracked mirror. On it lay a wedding veil, pristine despite the decay surrounding it. As he reached out to touch it, a cold hand clasped his wrist. Ajay spun around, his flashlight revealing a woman in a bridal sari, her face obscured by a veil. "You shouldn't have come here," she said, her voice trembling with both sadness and anger. "Who are you?" Ajay asked, his heart pounding. "I am Devika," she replied, "the bride who was forgotten, the woman who was betrayed." Devika's voice grew steadier as she began to recount her story. "Rajan was my world. I trusted him, loved him, and dreamed of a life by his side. But on our wedding day, I learned the truth. He never intended to marry me. I was merely a pawn in his schemes." As she spoke, the room seemed to transform around Ajay. He was no longer in the decaying mansion, but in a grand wedding hall filled with guests. At the center stood Devika, radiant and hopeful, waiting for Rajan. The crowd's murmurs grew louder as the hours passed, and whispers of Rajan's betrayal spread like wildfire. When the truth was revealed, Devika fled to the forest, her heart shattered. In her despair, she returned to the mansion and vowed never to leave until Rajan came back to face her. Over time, her sorrow turned to anger, binding her spirit to the place. The vision faded, and Ajay found himself back in the dimly lit room. Devika's form flickered like a candle flame. "You must leave," she warned. "The mansion is cursed. My pain has turned this place into a prison, and no living soul should remain here." Ajay, moved by her story, refused. "You don't have to suffer alone anymore. Tell me how I can help you find peace." Devika hesitated before whispering, "Bring him to me. Only then can I let go." Determined, Ajay returned to the village and uncovered records of Rajan's descendants. He discovered that Rajan had lived a long life, seemingly unrepentant of his betrayal. His grandson, Vikram, now resided in a nearby city. Ajay tracked Vikram down and convinced him to visit the mansion. Though skeptical, Vikram agreed, intrigued by the idea of confronting his family's dark past. When they arrived at the mansion, the air grew colder, and the floral fragrance intensified. Devika appeared, her form shimmering in the moonlight. "You are not Rajan," she said, her voice steady but filled with sorrow. "I am his grandson," Vikram replied. "I've come to atone for his sins." Devika stared at him for a long moment before lowering her veil. Her face was hauntingly beautiful, but her eyes were filled with unshed tears. Rajan broke my trust, but you have shown courage. That is enough. She placed her hand on Vikram's head in a gesture of blessing. May your family never bear the weight of betrayal again. As the first rays of dawn broke through the forest canopy, Devika's form dissolved into a shower of golden light. The mansion, once foreboding, seemed less menacing, as though her release had lifted its curse. Ajay documented the encounter but chose to share it only with the villagers, ensuring the tale of the forgotten bride would be remembered not as a story of vengeance, but as one of redemption and closure. The mansion became a symbol of hope, a place where people came to honor Devika's memory and seek solace for their own heartaches. And though her spirit was gone, her legacy remained, a reminder of the resilience of love and the power of forgiveness. Story 10. The village of Chandipur, nestled beside a misty lake, was known for its timeless beauty and a legend that haunted its people. The story of Sanvi, the eternal bride. Every year, on the anniversary of her ill-fated wedding night, villagers claimed to hear her bridal anklets jingling near the lake under the moonlight. Anya, a history student visiting the village, was captivated by the story. Her curiosity led her to question the villagers. Who was Sanvi, and what happened to her? The elders hesitated but eventually shared the tale. Decades ago, Sanvi, the daughter of a wealthy merchant, was engaged to Aryan, a kind-hearted farmer. Their love was pure and unshakable. However, Sanvi's father disapproved of Aryan's humble background. To sabotage the union, he made a secret pact with a rival suitor, Karan, who sought to claim Sanvi as his own. On the night of the wedding, as Sanvi and Aryan prepared to exchange vows, Karan arrived with armed men. A violent altercation ensued, and Aryan was killed before Sanvi's eyes. Overcome with grief and rage, Sanvi cursed those responsible and threw herself into the lake, vowing to return each year until justice was served. Anya, intrigued and skeptical, decided to investigate further. Her research led her to the ruins of Sanvi's family mansion, abandoned after the tragedy. With a local guide, she ventured into the crumbling estate. The air was thick with dust, and the eerie silence was broken only by the occasional creak of old wood. In a forgotten corner of the mansion, Anya discovered a chest filled with letters exchanged between Sanvi and Aryan. The words were tender, filled with dreams of a life they never got to live. Tucked beneath the letters was a delicate anklet, its tiny bells still intact. That night, Anya decided to stay near the lake, determined to witness the phenomenon herself. As midnight approached, a dense fog rolled over the water. The soft tinkling of anklets echoed through the air, and a figure in a bridal sari emerged, her face hidden behind a shimmering veil. Sanvi, Anya whispered, her voice trembling. The figure turned towards her, and though her face remained obscured, Anya felt the weight of her sorrow. "Why have you disturbed my rest?" Sanvi's voice was both mournful and stern. "I want to help you," Anya said. "Tell me what needs to be done." Sanvi hesitated before speaking. "My soul is bound to this lake by the curse of betrayal. Only when the truth of that night is revealed and justice is done can I be free." Determined, Anya returned to the village and began digging into the archives. She unearthed records of Karan's confession before his death years later. In a letter he had written on his deathbed, Karan admitted to orchestrating the attack on Aryan with Sanvi's father's approval. With the villagers' help, Anya presented the evidence to the local council. The villagers, shocked and remorseful for their ancestors' complicity in the cover-up, gathered at the lake on the next anniversary of Sanvi's death. As midnight approached, the lake shimmered under the moonlight, and Sanvi's form appeared once more. This time, her veil was lifted, revealing a face etched with pain yet radiant with hope. "The truth is finally known," she said, her voice carrying over the still waters. "But justice lies not in revenge, but in remembrance. Honor Arian and me by ensuring no love is ever destroyed by greed again." The villagers lit lanterns and placed them on the lake as a symbol of their pledge to uphold her wish. The glow of the lanterns reflected on the water, creating an ethereal scene. As dawn broke, Sanvi's form began to fade. Before disappearing, she smiled at Anya. "Thank you for hearing my story," she said softly. "You've given me peace." The lake returned to its serene state, the curse lifted at last. Anya, deeply moved, vowed to share Sanvi's tale far and wide, ensuring her love and sacrifice were never forgotten. From that day on, the villagers celebrated an annual festival by the lake, honoring the eternal bride and cherishing the bonds of love and truth that her story had inspired.